a 5,600-year-old murder mystery. What's not to like? Prehistoric cold case is solved as gruesome study reveals man shot in the face 5,600 years ago was actually killed by an arrow to the chest. So runs the headline on this one. So glad you could join us. Thank you for watching. I'm Michael Bott.
I'm Rupert Solskin.
Also known as the Prehistory Guys, bringing you fresh news about old stuff. Please do hit the like, subscribe and notification buttons, and if you've got a moment, do take a look at our Patreon page and our Buy Me a Coffee page if you're looking for some little way to show these two old codgers some love. I say, Holmes, old chap,
Yes.
What do you make of this one?
It's a corker, isn't it?
Yeah.
Whichever way you describe it, he was not a lucky man. I think what's so fascinating about this really is that each of the different disciplines involved in this piece of research are fascinating in themselves. You know, the fact that they've reconstructed this man's face, the fact that they've actually gone into the anatomical aspects, almost, you know, forensic pathology, trying to analyse how it was that he actually died. And it's just fascinating. And I have to say, this man taking an arrow to the face, and that's probably not what killed him, that I can't think of any other instance in all the violence that we've seen in prehistoric excavations and things like that. I can't think of a single instance where somebody has been killed in quite this way. You know, whether it was people looking down at him, you know, it's been suggested that he was up the killers were up a tree or something like that. But it's fascinating. It's really nice to try unravelling this.
Yeah. We'll probably get to our feeble attempts at unravelling this because it's one of those splendid, fertile grounds for anybody's imagination, really. And but the great thing about this is they've gone part way with the forensics. The headline I just wrote out, which said "Prehistoric cold case is solved," solved in capital letters.
Yes.
It's taking it a bit far.
Teeny bit.
Solved, I don't think so, but it brings more evidence to the table, so we can.
Yes, we got a confession, Your Honour. It's going a little bit far.
Anyway, I shall start reading. Oh, by the way, this text that I'm reading from is the article in the Daily Mail. Which was fair enough, and I have to say, what we do, we can't read you the paper, and the paper is actually in Brazilian this time around, in Spanish. So we found a translation, unfortunately. Portuguese. I do beg pardon. Portuguese, which we found a translation of, so we've read that, breezed through that. But the reason we're using newspaper articles to digest the entire thing, I mean, number one, we'd be here forever and a day if we attempted to write up this stuff. So most articles are dependent on press releases that have come from the original source, and often you find they're pretty much copy and pastes of whatever press release they've gotten. So that's why we use newspaper articles as our basic source, and go through, and if we feel that they've got it slightly wrong or misinterpret the paper or come away, we say so. Sorry, need to get that out of the way.
Quite right.
And but on the other hand, I've trapped myself into doing it every time now. I don't think that would be a good idea. Anyway. I'll start reading from it. Scientists have finally solved prehistoric cold case 5,600 years after it happened. The skeleton of the Porsmose.
Well done.
The Porsmose man was found in 1946 in a peat bog near Næstved, Denmark, with arrows still embedded in his skull and breastbone. Before we go any farther, Porsmose on the page. It reads as Porsmose, which would be wrong. In short, it actually means something. Pors is a word for a plant that thrives in peat boggy environment. Bog myrtle, I think it's called. And mose is a Danish word for a bog. So it's bog myrtle, bog man. Or if you go to the ancient Norse, Pors is a word for a bog, so it could be bog man.
I like that.
Yes.
I do like that.
We'll go with bog man, shall we?
We'll go with bog
right.
man, yes.
Okay. So now his face can be seen for the first time since his mysterious death, after scientists probing his killing rebuild his likeness from his bones. There are a couple of errors in that sentence. One is we're not actually, and this is a fair cop actually, these are really actually not scientists. Maybe the definition of the word scientist has been redefined in some point in the last years, and we've missed out there, Rupert. But they didn't also rebuild his likeness from his bones, not strictly speaking. We'll say more about that a bit later on, perhaps. In the process, they revealed something counterintuitive, that the fatal arrow was not the one in his face, but the one in his chest. Rupert, is that it's interesting that we make that assumption, that an arrow to the face is more likely to be fatal, more injurious than one to the chest. Do we automatically make that assumption?
I don't know. I've got to be honest. When I looked at the skull with the arrow pierced in it, I thought that wouldn't be fatal. It's going down through his nose and through his palate into his mouth. Misses brain cavity altogether. I mean, I suppose shock could play a part there, but that was my first thought, that's not a fatal wound.
Although infection would be very likely in that case. And so
after the event, yes, true.
After the event,
yes.
Probably, yes.
But no, the arrow to the chest, that would have been a clincher, I think. You're not getting up from that.
For reasons which we'll go on. It's just an interesting thing that, it's something about the face that we regard as probably more precious than taking one to the sternum. Forensic facial reconstructions are usually concerned with rebuilding living faces out of the dead using their skulls. But Cicero Moraes, lead author of the new study, said this construction was unique, capturing the death of the subject instead. He said, the objective is usually to know what the individual's face looked like, but in the present work we're also interested in knowing what injuries could have been caused to the anatomical structure. It's interesting. I mean, I said these guys aren't scientists, Cicero Moraes and his colleagues. Some of them, indeed, it says, have worked with the Brazilian police in the forensic department. So these are not scientists on the archaeological side of things. They're very much in the 3D reconstruction of stuff from a forensic point of view. Doesn't devalue that doesn't devalue the work that they're doing in any way, but just to place their study slightly away from the academic. This is not academic work. Although it's presented academically, the work itself it seems to be more ad hoc and to be done for illustrative and educational purposes rather than
almost like a photo fit, isn't it? Really,
it's almost like a photo fit. And he added, although the arrow in the face is visually striking and uncomfortable.
Yeah, do you think? Sorry.
Yeah, no shit, Sherlock, and could be fatal depending on the situation. It was one in the chest that hit important structures. The study revealed that the fatal arrow, itself made of bone, had likely penetrated the man's brachiocephalic vein, aortic arch, brachiocephalic vein, aortic arch, and right pulmonary vein, killing him, i.e. he bled out. How quickly that would happen, that's another question, I guess. So to complete their work, interesting use of the word complete, the authors began by virtually rebuilding the bones of the Porsmose man using photographs and measurement data. Do we want to say a little bit about the actual techniques that they use? Because when we think about visual reproductions or recreations of the faces of deceased individuals, especially in the in the archaeological and prehistoric arena, we often see people building physical models on top of skulls. The recreations of burials that have been found or what have you, and building them up with clay and stuff and sticks to get the right depth of flesh and skin and etc. on top of what's going on. This is purely taking place within the digital domain. And further than that, they're not even working from the original skull or remains. They're working with photographs in the first place of the remains, and of which there are not that many. And so the technique is to build a digital model just from a 2D image. And I think the trickery with this, one of the things is they are using an app, it's software called Blender, which is ubiquitous in the 3D cinema scene creation. In gaming, Blender is massive. Many scenes you see and objects and things you see in role-playing games, for example, are built within Blender and other programs. So Blender is this thing within which you can build 3D models, after which you can place them anywhere. But I'm getting a bit complicated about that. But they actually worked from photographs of the skull and the arrow, not from the original bones. Is that helpful or not?
Yeah, but it's interesting, isn't it? Because you'd think that with technology at our disposal now, that it would have been, or it wouldn't have been difficult to have 3D scanned the actual skull in the first place. So it's an interesting discipline to have used, or technique to have used.
Yes, but probably 1/100th of the cost.
Yes, but a 3D scan, I don't think that's expensive these days, is it?
It's a far more expensive thing than just grabbing the photograph off the web.
That is totally true, yes. Yes.
There's no journeying involved.
But it's true, but what price accuracy, I don't know. Yeah.
Well, that's the point. That's the point of them being able to do this accurately within the app. I think it's a question of the commercial world meeting a sort of academic world, because these are commercial. This software is commercial. Often you find in academic world that they tend not to use expensive. Mind you, Blender's free, I think.
Yes, it is. It's an open source.
Quote me. Yes, Blender is free, but you need to be seriously trained in it in order to do it. It's quite a thing. So what I'm saying is that they're coming from outside, and just using fantastic tools to be able to do this. It seems that way anyway. So graphics expert, that's what he is. He's not a scientist, he's a graphics expert. Mr. Morea said, when we reconstructed the face using forensic techniques, creating a bust that included the areas hit by the arrowheads. In the chest area where an arrow hit the sternum, we also reconstructed some other bones and the circulatory system. So it was possible to assess where the fatal arrow had passed through. Mr. Moraes said the resulting face was a strong one. At the time of death, Porsmose man was 35 to 40 years old. He stood roughly 1.66 meters tall. And the mystery surrounds the circumstances of his killing, but after he was shot in the face and the chest, his body either fell into the water or was thrown there. Whether he was executed, murdered, or fell in battle is lost to history.
Isn't that the truth?
And, there's not much more to say, about that and the science. Interestingly also, that it's not just using photographs of the actual remains themselves, but to recreate the structures otherwise, it also in 3D, so you get these incredible pictures. They're hybridized with other 3D digitized skeletons or remains. Tomography, such an important role to play in all of this, is the deep 3D imaging of tissues and bone and stuff in the medical field. The sound waves and things like that can be used to model non-destructively organs and tissue, etc., so that you can import them into the 3D realm and manipulate them and look at them from all different angles. So the missing bits of Porsmose man were provided by other sort of virtual donors and then scaled so that they matched completely the measurements of Porsmose man. And that's how you get these images here, and how they worked out that this particular arrow must have pierced these three fundamental what's the word? Yeah.
Anatomical parts? What would you like? Vital organs?
Vital organs.
Take your pick.
Yes. No, I was thinking the circulatory system, bits of the circulatory system. Yeah. So there's two things missing. A bit of, that's good. Got the good forensic stuff. Now, here, what about the detective work? Because something that's completely missing, and I haven't been able to find it anywhere else, at the beginning of their article, they say that he was not alone. That there was another body with him. When Axel Pedersen was the worker who found him in 1946. And there's a brief mention of the fact that there were two people that he dug up. So, was that anything to do with the murder? I don't know.
I missed
murder.
That
I called it a murder.
Well, I think that's fair. Yes.
I'll read it to you. Hold on a second. Where are we? Yes. Right at the top there. In August 1946, during peat cutting work in Porsmose, worker Axel Pedersen found some human bones with an arrowhead piercing one of the pieces. He then notified the National Museum of Denmark, which subsequently sent experts who excavated and found, 2 meters deep, several parts of the skeletons of 2 people. There you go. So there's another little bit of thing to throw into the mix.
Yes. Yes.
The other thing is that I don't know if the attentive of you will have noticed, I think it's mentioned in the article, that one of the arrowheads has is circular and one of them is square.
Yes, that's quite interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. Suggests to me that probably belonged to 2 different people.
Yeah.
Can't say for sure, but there's a kind of personal preference thing going on there, maybe.
Yeah.
Don't know.
Yeah. No, it is. It's fascinating. There's so many questions. It's funny that in the museum they've actually created a story for it. They've given it a narrative, which is interesting because it's completely impossible to know what actually went on. Was this an innocent man who copped it, or was this a brigand who got what he was asking for?
You're talking about what the National Museum of Denmark.
I am, yes.
Right, I shall read it to you, and dear viewer, you can make up your own mind about this, the value or not of this. All it says is, the article says it was posted on social media, so where, when, what and why, we do not know. But this is the story that they gave out, National Museum of Denmark. It read, while everyone is fast asleep, strangers enter the house. The dogs growl, but are silenced with clubs. The strangers break into the courtyard and set fire to the thatched roofs of the houses. He wakes his family and grabs his axe. Together they escape the burning house, but there is chaos outside, and he loses sight of his children. He can see one of the strangers leaving with his wife. He runs after him with his axe raised, but then he feels a searing pain in his chest, and the light disappears. By the time the next arrow hits his face, he is already on his way to the eternal cornfields of his ancestors.
It's a very Roman narrative, really. What can you say?
Yeah, like it might be that it didn't happen like that at all.
Do you think? Yeah.
I'm afraid I do think, yes. I mean, if I was being detective, I would pick several holes in this narrative anyway to begin with. Let's not dwell on it. I mean, all that opens up really is the dialogue about how valuable, how far, in public education, you can go with creating a narrative that's helpful. Once it goes off in, I mean, it can be valuable, stimulating other people's imagination. I think that may be it. But what do you think, Rupert?
I don't think it's helpful in this instance at all. To be honest, I think there are circumstances when it does help to make sense of a set of circumstances, but there are just so many different possibilities around this that it seems silly to pick something quite so florid.
Yeah, indeed. But the basic things are, the most interesting thing about this is the angle of entry of the two arrows.
I was just going to say, I particularly the face, because unless he was unlucky and that the arrow in the face got him, maybe as he was falling. Maybe he was already on his way to the ground when that arrow hit him in the face. If not, then it's quite, it could have been an ambush, somebody up in a tree or somebody on a roof, or it's all sorts of things. But
can I rule out one thing, and that is probably why people don't query this so much, because they often assume that arrows are shot into the air and do their damage on the way down. That's not the way. Unless they're harrying an advancing army or something like that. But to do damage, arrows are shot level and at close quarters. Yeah. So the fact that these are, if he was standing up at the time and received these blows, then the assailant would have had to have been considerably elevated above.
Yeah.
So imagine that without knowing the contours of the land there. Maybe he was in a ditch or something like that. Maybe he was in the river that he, took him away. That he was
also possible.
Disappeared into. Could have been fishing or something like that, and the shot came from above. Or he could have been already on the ground.
Yeah.
And the arrows were shot down.
He could have been on his knees being executed. Even we have no idea.
Yeah. So, that also is true. I mean, looking at, I'm impressed by the level of penetration of particularly the square arrow into the sternum, because that's going to, considering the bone, the arrowhead is made of bone itself in the first place. That depth of penetration, I wonder, more helpful maybe to do calculations about what the velocity of that arrow must have been, and then you can get an idea of how proximate the shooter was. All these sorts of questions. So, solved in capital letters, I'm afraid doesn't do it. It just,
not really.
study
but fascinating
opens more
research nonetheless.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's it with 5,600-year-old murder mysteries. Hit the like and subscribe button. Do join us on Patreon and buy us a coffee. Not much more to be said, is there?
Not really. No. Thank you for listening, folks. Thanks for watching.
Till the next time. Bye-bye.
See ya.